Welcome to Brew Crime, the podcast where we drink brews, talk crime, conspiracies, or whatever catches our attention. This is Mike and my co-host.
Hello. My name's JT, and we are gonna take our cases far into England.
England town, London town.
I don't really know why. I have no idea what accent any of that was. I'm not gonna apologize for it though. I'm just not. You want me to apologize? Become a Patreon subscriber. Then I'll apologize.
Probably still not.
Yeah, probably not. It's not in the fine print. I don't guarantee that in any of our packages. So, Jesus. Sir, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing okay.
That's good.
The weather is still, fairly warm here and really dry, and there's more and more forest fires popping up. Otherwise, it's good. And yes, it is getting to the middle of October now, and there's still basically no rain in Metro Vancouver. Rainforest.
Mike's blaming all the smoke in Metro Vancouver on forest fires, but really it's just all together collectively. Vancouver has hotboxed themselves.
Yeah.
And they just all exhaled at the same time.
Exactly.
That's not it. Oh, man, I hope
for some reason
stays
this
safe.
forest fire smells like skunk. No.
I don't know why I'm hungry.
Yeah.
But here we are. Yeah, so we are definitely doing part 2 of Crimes of England.
Woohoo.
And my case, I'm going to talk about it in a second, but what is important to know is that it happened, majority of it, between the 50s to the 80s and kind of even into the 90s. So, long-term case, really nothing funny about it except the dude, because he's, oh man. We'll get there. Yeah, douche canoe. But I do want to introduce my beer that I chose for this case, and that it is from Legend Brewing Company, and it's called Hazy Days IPA, and it was brewed right here in Richmond.
Legendary.
Legendary. So it's a New England style hazy IPA. It is opaque. It's lovely. It's got some. It's dry hopped with Citra and Azacca. Am I saying that right? Azacca for big juicy flavor. And aroma with medium bitterness. That's pretty much right. It's tropical, stone citrus.
Looks
it's
pretty.
A beautiful beer. Yeah, dude, it's super pretty. So, it's like, it's a chill IPA. It's not like an IPA where your tongue's like doing knots. And that's how I describe beers. So, all right. So let's hop into this. What do you think, sir?
I guess we should.
Yeah, I guess. So there comes a time when each one of us will research something that, one, becomes bigger than they meant for it to, or two, is horrific and terrifying in so many senses of the words. And I have to admit, before I saw the documentary and read the research and articles about Jimmy Savile, I had never heard of him. And I'm sure he would be saddened by that fact, and I'm certainly not. And I'm sure all of you will be happy to dump any knowledge of him when I am done. I know that's the best way to start an episode and a case, but you didn't come here for the flowers and the candy. That's what Brewery Report is for. Shameless plug.
I mean, hey, I try to put all this stuff out of my memory after we research and write it and talk about it too, and same with all the different podcasts I consume. I listen to it, I learn about it, and then I try to forget about the douchebags.
And that's why when people bring up small things from our episodes, I'm like, wait, what did I say about that? I never remember. Exactly. So Jimmy Savile was, in public, one of the most popular personalities from the late 50s into the new century. He seemed to make a lot of people happy. And in addition, he raised an unheard of amount of money for charities and hospitals.
Oh, jeez.
But who was this man, and who was he really? So, this is an insane situation, and it's one that really can be all over the place, and we know just how much I enjoy being all over the place. And the reality is, I have ADHD. When I wrote this, I was being tested for ADHD. I now know I have it. Mike, do you know anything about Jimmy Savile?
I know he's a garbage human.
He is a garbage human. I'm going to send you a very fast picture of Jimmy. Here we go. And I just want you to keep this thought just in your this picture, this image in your memory.
Okay, I'll put it up on the other screen.
There you go.
There we go.
You might not want to leave it up.
I'm not going to.
Yeah, I was going to say. All right, so there he is. So Jimmy was born at Consort Terrace in Leeds, West Riding of Yorkshire, on October 31st, 1926. Oh, boy, if that wasn't a horror show. Maybe it wasn't the beginning, but this all became a horror show. So Consort Terrace is kind of within Little London, and it's primarily an urban location, and the local area, per 2011 census, said each group of postcodes contains around 100 people. It's located within Leeds, which has a population of 812,000 as of 2021. And a few other people from Leeds, Peter O'Toole, Charlie Heaton, who's the older brother in Stranger Things.
Oh, really?
The older brother of... he's the older brother. He takes the photos. He has the longer hair. That's Charlie Heaton.
Yeah.
Also, Mel B. from Spice Girls.
Oh, and, Spice Up Your Life.
Yeah, and Matthew Lewis, who plays Neville in Harry Potter.
Huh.
I know. Jimmy had 6 siblings. He was the youngest. He lived with Mary, Marjorie, Vincent, John, Joan, and Christina.
Peter, Paul, and Mary?
Yeah, right? Puffin the Magic Dragon. So if you couldn't tell, it was a hugely Roman Catholic family. His dad
didn't have 30 kids, or 30 brothers and sisters?
Every sperm is sacred. So his dad's name was Vincent Joseph Marie Savile, who was he was a bookmaker's clerk and an insurance agent. Everybody's favorite. His mom was Agnes Monica Kelly. His paternal grandmother was Scottish. He grew up during the UK's Great Depression. I didn't really know much about this, so I actually looked it up a little bit. It was the period of the 30s, which came from the global Great Depression, and Britain's world trade fell by half. Heavy industry fell by a third. Registered unemployment numbered 3.5 million, and many more were only part-time. It reached 70% unemployment in some areas at the start of the 1930s. So
that's horrifying.
It absolutely is horrifying. So you'll notice there's a lot of things that Jimmy has said repeatedly, as if every line is a branding opportunity. In regards to growing up during the Depression, he said, quote, I was forged in the crucible of want. He's so dramatic. He makes me look like Steve Martin. So the family was, like I said, super Catholic. And in fact, Jimmy's mom thought a woman named Margaret Ann Sinclair was the reason Jimmy survived through early illness at the age of 2. She was a Scottish nun who was known as Sister Mary Frances of the Five Wounds. So she was, Yep.
Is there a story behind that name?
If I would have looked it up, I'm sure there would be. But, oops. It's a fair assumption to think I would look that up, though.
Yeah. I mean, it could just be like the 5 wounds of like Jesus, supposedly, the hand, the feet, and
1,
the side.
2, 3, 4, 5.
Both
yeah,
feet,
I guess
right?
so. Both feet, yeah.
Maybe, but
That's
I don't know
possible.
what she did. I don't know anything about her, so maybe we should
reformed Catholic
defame her.
and not talking about. All right, so he went to, of course, a Catholic school called St. Anne's, but he left at 14, and at that point he went and did a series of jobs. So here's the top of the pops version of the jobs he had. He was an office worker. He conscripted as a Bevan boy during World War II at the age of 18. He worked in the coal mines and suffered spinal injuries from a short fire's explosion. And because of that, he wore a steel corset for 3 years.
That doesn't sound very comfortable. I mean,
No.
corsets aren't, for the most part, if they're worn the way they were then, but...
Steel corset. Forged in steel, he was.
Yeah. I think back braces are a little more comfortable now than that.
Probably. And then he was a scrap metal dealer as well, which... I'm going to be honest with you. I have images from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang in the very beginning scene with the scrap metal dealer who sells the car to the kids.
I've seen the movie as a kid.
It's a deep cut. It's a deep cut. People are either going to get it or be like, what the fuck is he talking about? Which I'm used to, so that's fine.
True, yeah.
So in the early 1940s, dance halls were a thing. I mean, I guess they still are, but, Jimmy started to play records at these dance halls. So this is kind of his big breakthrough, according to him.
Yeah.
He claimed to be the first DJ, and he wrote that he was the first to use 2 turntables and a microphone in 1947. It doesn't hold up at all.
That song was a ripoff then. Two turntables and a microphone. Where is that?
Well done. It doesn't hold up. Twin turntables were actually depicted in a BBC handbook in 1929. And I highly doubt that he was the first DJ.
Hard to believe this guy would lie.
Oh, no. And the more we get into this, it's going to be less and less difficult to believe. Yeah. Well, that wasn't enough for Jimmy because he then became a semi-professional athlete.
Oh.
He competed in the 1951 Tour of Britain cycle race and also worked as a professional wrestler. This guy, I'm telling you what, he's a piece. In an article written in 2013, he was quoted as saying, "If you look at the athletics of it, I've done over 300 professional bike races, 212 marathons, and 107 pro fights. No wrestler wanted to go back home and say a long-haired disc jockey had put him down. So from start to finish, I got a good hiding. I've broken every bone in my body. I loved it."
If you've broken every bone in your body, you've probably done something wrong because you weren't good at what you were doing.
But he sees these random things as like badges of honor.
Yeah.
I'm not sure really if any of that's true. I'm sure there's some way to figure it out, but this is an hour or less episode, so.
Yeah. Has Johnny Knoxville even broke every bone in his body?
I don't. You know what? I think if you count for how many bones he's broken over and over again, yeah. Might have.
Yeah.
So, if you put aside the sports for now, he lived in Salford for around a decade, and then he began working at the Plaza Ballroom on Oxford Street, and this is in Manchester in the mid-1950s. If you're a 90s kid, you will know this reference, but Jimmy was very much the stoop kid from Hey Arnold. He was always sitting on the front step. Stoop kid was never going to leave his stoop. He would just sit there and eat and just chill there. He went on to manage the Mecca Locarno Ballroom in Leeds a few years later. He continued doing this through the early 1960s, and he also managed the Mecca-owned Palace? I don't know. It's French. Dance hall. Where's the folks from our last episode?
Yes. You silly English nigget.
You nigget. Oh, your mother was a hamster and your father smelt of elderberries. Anyways, it was in Essex. So Jimmy knew what sold and what was popular. His Monday evening records-only dance sessions were quite popular with teens.
Oh.
While in Ilford, a music executive from Decca Records discovered him. Decca was all over the place, but kind of started, as I understand it, with classical music, and then they later went on to sign names like Count Basie, Billie Holiday, Bing Crosby, and more.
Okay.
And
You lost me at first, but then you got me.
I came back around, right?
Yeah.
They were actually the ones that released the very first recording of White Christmas.
Oh, wow.
Either case, I don't know why it's got to be white. Oh, it's snow. Whatever.
It's Cocaine Christmas.
Cocaine. Well, Bing Crosby. In either case, the little creep was discovered and things exploded. You like how that works out?
Yeah.
So let's talk just a little bit about his career. Jimmy moved from the dance houses to the radio. He worked as a DJ at Radio Luxembourg from 1958 to 1968. So when Rudy and I had a radio show, we absolutely loved it. So we added a show to it, and then eventually we came up with a podcast. We just had all these ideas, these things pumping around. And if anybody knows me now, I can't just do one thing. It's not possible.
Or 2 things. Or 3 things.
Or 5. But by 1968, Jimmy was in charge of 6 different programs a week. And his Saturday show alone reached 6 million listeners, and he became one of the most popular DJs in Britain.
Oh, I wish.
Yeah, I know, right? Right? If you know somebody, we're available.
Yes, exactly.
I'm available in more than, for the right price, I'm available in a lot of different ways. Just give me an IPA. We'll be fine. So from 1969 to 1973, he hosted Speakeasy. This show was a discussion-based program that focused on the teenage age group. The further we get into this story, the more creepy this is all going to become, I assure you.
Sounds like it.
Mm-hmm. On the radio itself, he hosted Jimmy Savile's Old Record Club. He added the Double Top 10 show, which ended up as the Triple Top 10 show, and he left Radio 1 after almost 2 decades. He then hosted the Vintage Chart show on BBC World Service for a little over 2 years. He continued working on various stations and shows, and even came back to guest on shows decades later. When he moved into television, I mean, you know that saying that somebody has a face for radio? That was Jimmy, right? that was Jimmy. You've seen a photo. That was Jimmy. But, some people just get fucking lucky. He started by hosting the music program Young at Heart, and while the show was broadcast in black and white, he still dyed his hair different colors for every show.
Every show?
I call this eccentric.
Yeah,
knowing it was black and white, he still dyed his hair.
Yeah, crazy. I don't know. I don't get it.
Right? One of the biggest bookmarks, chapters, whatever, of Jimmy's life was his time on Top of the Pops. The first episode of this show aired on New Year's Day in 1964, and the show ran until July 30th, 2006, when Jimmy co-hosted. He co-hosted New Musical Express, which had bands like the Beatles, The Who, and a ton of others. He also did public information films. God. He did public information films. One of the most popular was his film that promoted seatbelt and road safety called Clunk Click Every Trip.
What?
It's terrible.
Clunk Click? Why not Click Click? I don't know.
It's a great question. The 60s. So, he was willing to do anything to look reasonable. The film actually led to a variety show he hosted called Clunk Click, and that show featured acts from the Eurovision Song Contest that's held over there. It's not just a Will Ferrell comedy. This wasn't enough, and the show transformed into the ever-infamous Jimmy You'll Fix It. And that show lasted for 19 years and led to him being awarded for, quote, wholesome family entertainment. Woo.
Ooh, jeez.
All right, so fundraising and volunteering. As I think everybody can see now, I'm kind of giving you Jimmy as he presented himself in public.
Yeah.
Then we're going to take this back. We're going to wind it back and open the curtain and pay no attention to the man behind the... No, we are. We are going to do that.
I'd also like to hear from other people that aren't from England. Like, do they know who this guy was from all these radio shows and stuff? Because I've definitely never heard of all these different shows and stuff that he was on.
I know. Like, I've heard tell of, like, Top of the Pops, right? Almost like it's a phrase, like it's a catchphrase, but never really linked everything together. I would be interested to see how far his influence or knowledge of him goes. I'm guessing Europe, and probably any of, like, the British colonies that probably get BBC, but, yeah.
Well, we get BBC. I have no clue.
That's a good point.
But I also don't look at BBC, so.
Well, I'm jealous, number one, but that's a whole nother conversation. Let's talk about his fundraising and volunteering, shall we? So remember that this guy is going to do anything for, one, attention, and two, looks or to help his image. And that included raising money and volunteering. And the more I push into the actual crimes and discovery thereof, the more you will cringe about this stuff. For now, though, you're going to be a lot like everyone else at the time, which Jim was a saint. So Savile is said to have raised more than $40 million for charity. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, that this was in the 80s, 1985.
Yeah.
A lot was actually raised earlier than that, but in order to minimize the sticker shock, let's say 1985. $40 million in 1985 is $134,711,144 today.
Wow. So he did some good stuff for sure.
Yeah. We'll talk about what else he was doing while he was doing the good stuff. I mean, it's insane. So he raised money for places like Stoke Mandeville Hospital, the spinal unit for the National Spine Injury Center, and St. Francis Ward. During his time fundraising and hosting shows and traveling the country, he also volunteered a ton of places. He primarily volunteered as a porter or someone who got patients to and from where they wished or needed to go. This included all ages, genders, etc. So Savile was so highly regarded, he had his own room at Stoke Mandeville and Broadmoor, the two places where he raised money for and where he volunteered. He also was appointed as the chair of an interim task force to see to the management of Broadmoor Hospital. For For 14 years, he served as the president of FAB, which is physically handicapped in the able-bodied community. He sponsored students doing research, reportedly donating more than $60,000 every year. In 2010, he promised $500,000 or 500,000 pounds over 5 years. This was completed even after his death.
Wow. I just like that acronym, too, FAB.
FAB?
That's good. That's
too.
good.
Savile also ran for charity. He ran in a multitude of marathons. He cycled for the Royal National Lifeboat Institution. He just... everything.
And I guess they learned after the Titanic they needed more lifeboats, so... Sorry, that one sunk. Sure. Iceberg ahead.
I was going to say the joke's ice cold. Damn it, Rose, will you let Jack on the damn door?
No, she won't.
There was space. Remove the petticoat and hug him. Body warmth. Doesn't matter.
Exactly.
It already happened. We can't change it. Also, it's fictional. Who knows? I just love everybody who went into the Titanic like, ooh, I wonder how this ends. And I'm like, you're the people that voted for Trump. Okay. So...
How could you tell me the boat sank?
Yeah. I didn't know it was coming, man. So he also set up 2 charities, Jimmy Savile Stoke Mandeville Hospital Trust in 1981 and Jimmy Savile Charitable Trust in 1984. He was basically like, in this case, he was like just fucking Trump putting his name on everything.
Yeah.
Right? By 2012, the charities had around 1.7 and 3.7 million pounds respectively. In terms of his image and friendships, that does go... It's really important to talk about. His image was something, and the only way to describe him is, quote, do a friggin' Google search because there's no way I could describe him. That's how I describe him. Look up Jimmy Savile. He was considered eccentric and distinctive. He, quote, relished being in the public eye and was a shrewd promoter of his own image. And he made catchphrases like the following popular. How's about that then? Now then. As it happens, and guys and gals. Which I want to say, but I'll probably be a little less want to say after this. He also wore, quote, fancy dress clothes all over the place in terms of design. He was most often pictured with a cigar. He once said, quote, my dad gave me a drag on one at Christmas, thinking it would put me off him forever, but it had the opposite effect. Okay.
Well, I guess I did have a sip of beer when I was little from my dad, and I didn't like it then.
And that's the rest is history.
Although I still don't like the beer he gave me a sip of, so.
No, that's fair. That's
Yellow
fair.
fizzy lager.
He was indeed a member of Mensa, the Institute of Advanced Motorists. He drove a Rolls-Royce. He was a life member of the British Gypsy Council, and which I think he was the first non-gypsy to actually be invited in.
Is it just a bunch of Roma people then, or?
I think so. I think that's what it is.
Technically, gypsy is like not a nice term. So.
Oh well, that's what it was called.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's why I'm confused by the.
Let's see. Gypsy Council has a Twitter account. They're called the Gypsy Council, working tirelessly for gypsies, Roma, and travelers in the UK and Europe.
Interesting.
Yeah. I guess it's one of those things where it's just like, claim it as your own.
They're taking it back.
Please do. I really don't know if Mensa was actually he was actually involved or, brought on to Mensa. But he was involved, like I said. He also was part of Athenaeum, which is a gentleman's club. So, some of his friends include, and hold your britches, Margaret Thatcher, Prince Charles, a.k.a. King Charles III, how appropriate, Diana, Princess of Wales, Prince Philip, Sarah, Duchess of York, his mother, his fucking mother. And you know what? This is it would totally be okay. In fact, I agree that if you can, it's great to be friends with your mom. You should be.
Yeah.
But let's explain it this way. He lived with her for most of his life after he bought a home. He called his mom Duchess. When she died, he kept her wardrobe exactly how it was and even had her clothes dry cleaned once a year.
Oh, my.
Mm-hmm.
Did he board up her room? Okay.
No, and we'll learn a little bit more about that in a bit in terms of when she died. So, just like everyone else, he said that he had many, many sexual relationships with women. He said, quote, "There have been trains and, with apologies to the hit parade, boats and planes. I am a member of the 40,000-foot club, and bushes and fields, corridors, doorways, floors, chairs, slag heaps, desks, and probably everything except the celebrated chandelier and ironing board."
Oh, my God. Does someone protest too much there? Like...
God, he's just like, he's that dude, right, who wore, like, the high socks and the sandals, who's just like, I've had everybody. Shut up.
Yeah.
Shut up, Bobby.
Sounds like that NoFX song, Together on the Sand, where it's just all about masturbation.
It's all by myself. So we're going to skip forward. I mean, we're going to kind of wrap up his life so that we can trash him. So, 1997, August 9th, Jimmy had a quadruple heart bypass. He knew he needed the surgery for 4 years, and Jimmy kind of had like this massive God complex, and I think he denied a lot of things that would betray this image by making him look mortal.
Yeah, and I mean, as someone who's putting this much money into the hospital system there and is a celebrity and all that, they could probably have that surgery flick of their wrist, right?
Oh,
like
friggin'
snap
easy,
of their fingers.
And I'll tell you, just like a good example of this whole God idea would be his presumption that everything would go just fine, because he actually bought a damn bench and put it in a damn park. It was to be dedicated to him, and it would say on the plaque, Jimmy Savile, but not just yet. On October 29th, 2011, he was found dead in his flat in Leeds. So it was yet. This was 2 days before his 85th birthday. He was hospitalized with pneumonia, and apparently his death was not found to be suspicious. What was suspicious was literally everything that happened after he died. So let's kind of just walk through the steps of he's died, now what did they do? He was buried in a closed satin gold coffin. This coffin was displayed at Queen's Hotel in Leeds. They buried him with the last cigar he smoked and the 2 books that he received for being on 2 episodes of This Is Your Life. 4,000 people showed up for him. He was buried at Woodland Cemetery in Scarborough after having his funeral at Leeds Cathedral on November 9th, 2011. He asked that his coffin be inclined at 45 degrees when buried so that he could see the sea. And in addition, he was encased in concrete.
Why?
It's a really good question, and one I'm not sure about. I have no answer for that. I'm sure it's somewhere in some book. I don't know. I really don't know. Because honestly, like, I would say it's like, so they couldn't grab DNA after the fact, after things were discovered. But I think he just thought he was so invincible. I don't think he was even thinking about that. So
Probably not.
So this next section I called now for something completely different. Hail to Monty Python. So I think at this point in our lives and in culture, when we read about someone who is utterly amazing, all we can think about is, what the hell is in their closet, and why does it look like a shitload of skeletons?
Yeah, because it is a shitload of skeletons.
It is. So when it came to the 50s, 60s, 70s, through today, and Jimmy Savile, well, actually, no, this fucker had 1 billion of them stashed away in his walk-in closet, along with his dead mother's wardrobe that he had laundered once a year. So we got a lot of skeletons going on. So we're just going to jump the shark. By the end of the investigation into Jimmy Savile, after his death, it was discovered that he preyed on and abused over 550 victims.
Holy shit.
These victims aged from 2 to 75 and everywhere in between. And these crimes occurred in multiple places, including the BBC broadcasting studios, 14 hospitals, and 20 children's hospitals across England.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah. So I think one of the only things we really can do is hit up kind of a timeline of this. What I'm afraid of is that we're going to kind of get all kinds of in the weeds, as like I usually do, and I kind of want to keep this part kind of I want to keep these things discovered, kind of just the inquiries, and I also kind of want to keep it pretty organized by date. So we mentioned he was born in October of 1926. The earliest incident of abuse recorded by the police occurred sometime in 1955. Savile's peak period of abuse was in the year 1966, and this period lasted for a decade.
Wow.
Yeah. So 4 years later, in this peak period, Savile began abusing girls at Duncroft Girls' School near Surrey, where he visited regularly. 2 years later, 1972, he was said to have groped a 12-year-old boy and his two female friends who were attending a Top of the Pops recording. If he was that damn brazen, you can only imagine what else was possibly happening every time he stepped onto that soundstage with those young folks.
Yeah, that's disgusting.
It is.
And I mean, yeah, if they're willing to do that out in public, what are they doing behind closed doors, right?
Yeah. So, sometime in the 80s, he was reported by a female victim who allegedly told the Metropolitan Police that she was assaulted in Savile's camper van. Yes, the original nondescript white van.
Oh.
In 1990, Savile was knighted.
Of course he was.
Oh, get ready. You're going to love this next part. He also received a papal knighthood. Yep, Sir Jimmy Savile.
They'll give that shit to anyone, won't they?
Apparently.
As long as you're rich and powerful and you've got the right friends.
Now, I will say this. He was up, I might talk about it later, but he was up for knighthood multiple times, and he was passed over multiple times, and it was only after he was vouched for by Margaret Thatcher.
The Thatch.
The Thatch. The thorny Thatch.
Thatch attack.
It sounds like a really shitty Pokemon move.
It does.
I choose you. Thatch attack now. All right.
And their trainer, Margaret. I don't know much about Pokemon.
I shall have you, Pikachu. All right, April 2000. We moved up 10 years. April of 2000 saw a TV documentary presented by Louis Theroux. Actually, it's probably Lewis, to be honest with you. That sounds like I added that line in there. No, I'm just literally thinking through this in my head now. Louis Theroux. Savile mentions or recognizes the rumors that he's a pedophile, but he denies it. Because, of course. In July of 2006, Savile co-presents the Last of the Top of the Pops episode. This appearance will be the cause of one allegation against him. Around March of 2008, he opened up legal proceedings against a newspaper that linked him to abuse in a children's home. Because this was literally his answer. If he didn't like what you were saying about him, boom, litigation.
Jeez. Yeah. When people do that, again, what are they trying to hide?
Exactly. In 2009, he was interviewed under caution by Surrey police. This was in regards to an alleged indecent assault at Duncroft School. There was insufficient evidence to take further action. He also had another allegation levied against him in 2009 in which a 43-year-old woman was sexually assaulted by him on a train journey between Leeds and London. October 29th, 2011, death of Jimmy Savile. November of 2011, an investigation into Savile began via Newsnight, which is a TV show. The reports make contact with former Duncroft pupils. In the same month, a BBC tribute program was aired called Jimmy Savile. As It Happened. That's the title. It was a tribute.
Yeah. Well, it already happened, unfortunately.
Yeah. Moving into December of 2011, a Newsnight editor, Peter Rippon, contacts reporter Marion Jones, telling him to stop working on other elements of the investigation because it wasn't strong enough without confirmation of the CPS angle. Jones, the reporter, emailed himself a, quote, red flag email, and he wrote out or considered the consequences to the BBC if they do not run the story. So basically, this editor said, we're not running this story right now. This was, it's wild to me.
Yeah,
December
really.
5th, Surrey police have confirmed that they have investigated, quote, a historic allegation of indecent assault alleged to have occurred at a children's home in Staines in the 1970s.
A children's home in Staines. Quite the name of the town.
It really is. Same year, 2011, December 9th, CPS decides not to prosecute Savile because of the lack of evidence. In early January 2012, the Sunday Mirror reported that the Newsnight investigation was canceled and said it clashed with the Fix-It tribute show.
Oh, Jesus.
So his tribute show, they stopped the news report because it was going back-to-back with that, and that wouldn't look good. February 2012, a reporter writes that Newsnight's Savile investigation was pulled because of the allegations made about abuse on BBC premises. The article also says that the BBC had information on Savile that the police did not have, and that Mark Thompson knew of the report, Mark Thompson being a BBC exec. October 2012, the ITV program Exposing Savile was finally broadcast. On October 8th, the BBC Director General spoke on the Today Show about how they felt regarding the handling of this story. In other words, it's a media stunt to say, robble, I didn't know, robble. That's, right?
Yep.
Truly, like, when somebody who is newer as a BBC Director General,
Yeah.
like, they've literally been treated like mushrooms where they're fed shit kept in the dark so that they can have plausible deniability. So maybe he didn't know, but also, yeah. The end of October in the same year, the BBC asked for an investigation into the culture and practices of the BBC in the decades that Jimmy worked there. A month later, Entwistle resigned as the Director General.
Oh, jeez. Ruh-roh. Scooby.
Like Scoob. A couple months later, January 11th, 2013, Scotland Yard labels Jimmy Savile as, and I quote, a quote, I already quoted, I'm quoting again, I'm overquoting, a prolific, predatory sex offender. After their investigation ended, their investigation showed 214 criminal offenses across 28 police forces between 1955 and 2009. 73% of his victims were children, and allegations spanned over 14 medical establishments as well.
Jesus.
In June 2014, research for the investigation confirmed at least 500 reports of abuse. And in the same month, the Department of Health published results of the investigations done by 28 medical establishments. In Leeds General Infirmary, Savile abused 60 people, including at least 33 patients aged from 5 to 75. At Broadmoor Hospital, a high-security facility, he abused at least 5, including 2 patients who were subjected to repeated assaults.
Fucking monster.
Yeah, so if
An
no one...
equal opportunity monster, too.
Yeah. If no one heard me kind of through this, I'm just going to repeat some of this while also introducing a few new pieces of information as well. Savile consistently looked for the trust of sick children and their families while raising money for charities. So again, he's been found to have abused at least 500 victims.
Yeah.
Most of the victims between the ages of 13 and 15, some as young as 2. Not only did he utilize his celebrity status and gregarious persuasion personality, he also used fear tactics, quote, a network of fear, to keep anyone from telling or learning the truth about him.
I thought that was only the Fox News network that was a network of fear.
It's true. It's true. I'm trying to think of a really cool acronym for Fox. Fear over xenophobia. That doesn't work.
No.
I got nothing.
Focusing on xenophobia.
There it is. That's it. Focus, Fox, on xenophobia. So, while I think the stats speak for themselves, I also think that it's important to share some of the stories that came out of this. Not as a spectacle, not as something to ogle at, but something that needs to be discussed. And I'm not going to share the names of the people from the stories. And, number one, I don't like doing that. They are, if still alive, trying to move on. And they sure as hell don't need more bullshit. So I'm going to omit the names. So, a Boy Scout in the 1970s was excited to be on one of the shows that Jimmy hosted. But that would soon end when Savile lured him into his dressing room at the BBC studio, something that was a pretty common occurrence. Jim'll Fix It, the show that he hosted forever, had badges that everyone wanted. They were coveted. If he helped you, you got a badge. Savile got him in the dressing room and asked him if he wanted a badge, and the young boy said, yeah. Then Savile molested him. He only stopped when someone opened the door to the room. So someone knew something and didn't say anything, which is either the bystander effect, the power of his celebrity, or just not wanting to get involved. They actually apologized to Jimmy and walked out. And then Savile threatened the boy.
You don't say sorry. You grab the kid out of the room, or him out if the kid can't leave the room, but
Right.
they're separated for sure.
Exactly. And I think there was a certain understanding that if you messed with Jimmy, you messed with every single, like, everybody in the world. Like,
That's okay, because I would still
what I
punch him right between the eyes.
Yeah, I really don't have a sense or a sensitivity to celebrity.
No.
If you're an ass, you're an ass. You know, you just happen to be an ass with a bigger bank account.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's some celebrities that I will get behind.
Yeah.
But overall, I don't care.
Right.
For every Kardashian that doesn't fucking matter, there's a Ryan Reynolds that's awesome.
Yeah. So, fuck you, TJ. You bitter son of a gun. Anyway, so Savile threatened the boy. He said, quote, "Don't you dare tell anyone about this. No one will believe you because I'm Jimmy. Don't tell your mates. We know where you live."
No, don't tell your mates. Tell the fucking cops.
Yep.
There's not a lot of times to tell you to tell the cops. Go tell the cops.
God, I don't even know if that would have worked at that point with the height of his celebrity.
Kick him in the nuts then.
God, it's really, truly a lot like, and I might mention this near the end, it's a lot like Bill Cosby.
Yeah.
Where just the celebrity was he was so revered that there's no way in hell that this could have possibly happened. It's not possible. He couldn't have done it. He's a family guy. All right. So is Peter Griffin. So, yep, exactly. So he most assuredly assaulted boys, girls, young women, and more at BBC Studios. He also assaulted patients and staff in the hospitals he volunteered and raised money for. And I know I mentioned this before, but holy shit, this is just something else. His positions of power gave him access to children, including cancer patients.
Jesus Christ. They're already suffering enough.
Right? I'm just layering shit on top of shit on top of shit.
Yeah.
Again, it was like the beginning of the show when I said, it's real funny to make fun the fuck out of Jimmy Savile.
Yeah.
But like when we get into like some of the specifics, it's just like I can't. There's nothing.
I'm just gonna guess too. I'm sure that the BBC had like some secretaries or something he was messing with too. You haven't mentioned it, but
yeah, I mean, he definitely didn't have qualms in terms of patients or staff at these at medical facilities. I'm assuming the same goes for everywhere else.
It'd have to be. When you get away with it here, you're gonna get away with it there, so you're gonna do it.
Exactly. So Leeds General Infirmary seems to have been one of the places he frequented the most. In 1960, he was 34 and began that relationship, and he started as a volunteer and worked on fundraisers for them. 8 years after starting at the infirmary, he decided he was going to be a volunteer, specifically, like at that point. This, of course, I mean, it is a bit unusual, but the big thing was he didn't want to volunteer behind a desk. He wanted to be a porter. And if you're not aware of what a porter does, or you don't remember what I said a little earlier, they cart patients to and from different procedures in the hospital, moving from room to room, unit to unit, even from ambulance or vehicle to check-in registration. Jimmy would transport patients as needed. So we all see where this might be going.
Doesn't sound like a job for a volunteer. I don't know.
It doesn't. Well, there's a lot of volunteers that do push patients from place to place.
Okay.
Like, that's fine, but literally it gave him audience with these folks at their most vulnerable, right?
Yeah. I would probably try to stick with an employee. Now, it's not guaranteed foolproof, but maybe an employee, especially for children being moved around in a hospital.
Yeah. Yes. So in 1960, at the age of 34, he began what would become a 50-year relationship with Leeds General Infirmary as a volunteer. He regularly visited the hospital as a fundraiser for the hospital's teaching efforts. Then in 1968, he unusually requested to be that part-time porter. Oh, man. A hospital administrator was interviewed years later and said, quote, "I was a little concerned about the press implications and how he would fit it into a busy teaching hospital. My concern was wholly unfounded, and he has done an extremely good job and is accepted by all sections of the staff." I'd say that
he shouldn't have been.
Yeah, I'd say that quote hadn't aged well.
No.
I'm not entirely sure if they were talking about how they felt then or if they're speaking without knowledge of what was coming out about him. I don't know. But Savile had a presence in the hospital for over 30 years, and while he used this time to raise money through vigorous fundraising campaigns in public, in private, he was a very different person. Again, some of these people couldn't move from their beds. Some were unable to speak. There was a lot of things going on. A victim who was 14 at the time tells his story about Savile walking up to him while he was wearing a hospital gown and in a wheelchair. And he said, he came up to me because I was literally just sat in the wheelchair at the front and waiting area there. And he came and leant over me and told me to cheer up and said, "Things can't be that bad." He put his hand on my leg as he said it, and then all of a sudden just moved his hand under my gown because I had a hospital gown on. I just had my dressing gown draped over me, put his hand on my genitals and squeezed them. How long it lasted, I don't know. I can't say. It was seconds, 10 seconds. It wasn't a long time. And then he looked at me and said, "Now then, I bet that's cheered you up."
No. Not a fucking chance. Old dude grabbing your junk? No.
Nope. It's horrifying. It's disgusting. And I'm going to go ahead and vomit.
I my beer.
Right? There's frustration, anger, infuriation. The last one isn't a word, but I don't really care. I'm making it a thing.
I'm getting closer and closer to wanting to pair my beer with this case.
Right.
Because this beer was called Headbanger, and I'd like to bang his head into a wall.
Oh, man. So the more famous he got, the more opportunities he had to inflict this kind of abuse. Because, quote, well, I said this, basically it's Jimmy. He's okay. He's got to be okay. He raises money. He's funny. He's around kids all the time. At the same time, the more famous he got, the whispers around his assaults and abuses became yells, hollers, conversations. I mentioned that Jimmy just continuously got bigger and bigger. It's because he was able to advocate for himself.
Yeah. He was just this posh gentleman, I'm sure.
Right. And in an article called "How a British TV Star Used Power and Fame to Abuse Hundreds of Children for Decades," they wrote, Jimmy Savile quickly weaponized his media pedestal into power that awarded him access to vulnerable. With the right access, he charmed everyone from sick children to the British royal family. Let's talk about that for a second, shall we?
He's a pedestyle, then.
He's a pedestyle.
Pedophile, yeah.
Yep.
And the British royal family, he's probably really good friends with a couple of them.
So here's the
problem. I wonder if he was friends with what's his name there that had the pedophile island.
Oh, Andrew?
No.
Epstein?
Epstein, yeah.
God, I don't think they really crossed over much.
Well, they would have been good friends.
Oh, they would have been buddies.
Yeah.
So the problem on top of everything else was that he truly was able to weaponize. And that's it's not even a figure of speech. It's not even close to a joke. He was just so good at what he did that he even had the royalty behind him. And I'm sure once this all came out, I'm pretty sure they felt pretty sheepish, though.
They probably didn't give a shit because they don't seem to really care about that stuff.
They happen to be above the law. Yeah. So Jimmy met Prince Charles, King Charles III, in the 1970s. And he then started making regular visits to his royal residence. He then was commenting on royal politics and giving suggestions. The old, now King Charles, was consulting Savile before appointing senior aides for himself and Diana, and he even consulted Jimmy on speeches.
Huh.
Which is insane.
Just a little bit.
Yep. So in terms of the aftermath of all of this, Savile's family decided that out of respect to public opinion, that they would take his gravestone from where he was buried. The stone wasn't saved. It's not displayed. It was taken in the night and dropped in a landfill.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, no shit.
They should have dug him up and done the same thing with his body.
Right? I mean, I guess he's just basically a concrete brick at this point, so.
Yeah.
Multiple
Jackhammer,
things named. Then. I don't want to see. I don't know if things decay in concrete. Do you? I guess maybe they do, but there's no oxygen.
Oxygen ingress for sure, but there's lime in concrete, so I don't know.
I don't know. Let's do an experiment. Let's go Bill Nye on this, Mike.
Let's ask the dog outside that's barking right now.
I don't hear him, but he's just saying hi, hello,
hello,
hi,
squirrel.
Squirrel. You are my master, and I love you. So, well, you're right. Multiple things named after Jimmy or having some award or whatever of Jimmy were taken down. He was stripped of honorary degrees. I didn't know this, but the entire knighthood he got, again, thanks primarily to Margaret Thatcher, was over when he died. Right? The Thatch. Yes, that would have been her wrestling nickname. Maybe that's where he met her. Maybe they wrestled each other. I don't know you, Jimmy, but I'm going to take you out.
I'm sure if he met her, and he'd probably try to wrestle her.
There's actually, I think there's a few rumors about that, but here we are. I didn't know that knighthoods basically are removed from the person when they die. So he died.
I didn't know that either. Got to make more room.
Right. I'm more than happy to be wrong. The foundations he created in his name said that they would redistribute their funds to other charities.
Good call.
Yeah. Letters were sent to Savile's estate, the BBC, Stoke Mandeville Hospital, Broadmoor, and Leeds General from lawyers or solicitors for 20 clients. They claimed to have been abused by Savile and that they were considering legal action. BBC said that it wouldn't air Top of the Pops any longer with Savile as the presenter. Finally, the impact of Jimmy Savile's bullshit truly created a national PTSD.
I believe it, yeah. Someone that is this intrinsic to the media in general, if you find out that they're a real piece of garbage, it's going to be shocking.
Yeah.
That's like finding out that Mr. Dress Up in Canada or Mr. Rogers was a scumbag, and neither were. But if you found that out, it would be just horrifying to generations of children, right?
It would be. It's like if all of a sudden we learned that Big Bird was being touchy-feely. You know what I mean? Please,
then
no.
Big Bird would be Thanksgiving dinner.
Actually, that might not be bad. Just saying. So in 2000, and I say the national PTSD because in 2001 there was an episode of Tweenies on CBeebies. I have no idea about the show. Just what it's called.
Sounds weird.
Yep. The group on there was actually starting their own band. There was a character who introduced the band to an audience, and his hairstyle was close enough to Savile's. Not only that, but the guy was wearing a tracksuit and using his catchphrases. So, whoopsie.
That's kind of creepy.
Yeah, they received over 200 complaints after that after a repeat airing of that in 2013. And the first airing of it was before anybody ever knew anything else about Jimmy. But the BBC apologized, said they would never broadcast it again. Good move.
Yeah. Too bad for the band, but yeah.
Yeah. In terms of Jimmy, there's so much about him I wasn't able to cover. There's so much that's just in his psyche, in so many other things he's done in terms of marathons and the like. I wish to hell that I could think of something smart or creative to end this case on. But the bottom line is that he was a creep, an abuser, a pedophile, and worse. He was so very bad, and it's so important to hold everyone accountable, no matter who they are or what their reputation is. And I think that's the bottom line.
Yeah, for sure.
And, for a lot of these cases, I try to come up with clever titles and things like that. I legit could only write the one about Jimmy Savile. There's nothing you could add to that. I mean, he's a horrible, horrible human being. And I'm glad that he's gone.
Well, that's why my English title was just all kinds of really, bad words about a person, British slang for shitty people.
And it's really interesting because even now, having mentioned it to a couple of our folks that we know over across the pond,
over yonder,
they're like, "Oh no!"
Oh bollocks!
You're covering him, and I'm like, well, I'm doing a light smattering, because quite honestly, there's really no way. There is a documentary on Netflix about Jimmy Savile, and it is actually. I find it really good. I find it pretty tightly done, and kind of in line with some of the research that I've done. So, check it out. You really just need to look up Jimmy Savile doc, and you're going to find it.
I've got a title for this one. Jimmy Savile, the Kitty Fiddler.
Jesus.
Because that's what he was. Don't
they
give
have
him a
that.
good name. Don't give him one that makes him sound cool like so many friggin' serial killers. Nope. He's the kitty fiddler.
He had that show called Jim'll Fix It. It should be Jim'll Fiddle It. Nope,
Yeah.
that doesn't play either. You know
No,
what?
it
That
doesn't.
shouldn't
No.
be said. That's bad. Anyways, that is my case on Jimmy Savile. If
Yeah.
you're interested in more about him, he truly is he's a horrible person. He's fascinating to study in terms of psyche. It's very interesting because really the only time he ever seemed to light up in that documentary is when he's talking about himself. It's true.
I'm not surprised
yeah.
one iota.
No, and I don't think anybody else is who's listening to this. But definitely check that documentary out and let us know what you think about it. And send us a couple messages on all the socials.
All the socials, yes, please.
And I'm going to let Mike close us out.
Thanks for tuning into Brew Crime. You can find us on all social media platforms at Brew Crime. We have a Facebook group, Brew Crime the Group. If you would like to support the show, head to patreon.com now. The money goes towards upgrading equipment and making the show that much better. You get one bonus episode a month, as well as early ad-free access to our episodes and our Brewery episodes with Paige from Reverie True Crime. So shout out to our Patreon supporters. True Crime Nana, Three Beers In Podcast, and the Faves of Our Lives. Peace.
Bye.
All cases on Brew Crime are written by Mike and JT or a writer we credit on the episode, and sources are put into our show notes for each episode. We always want to give credit to the people that research the cases we talk about. Check out our store at tpublic.com/stores/brew-crime-podcast, where you can purchase gear like t-shirts, phone cases, stickers, pillows, and all kinds of other cool stuff. Brew Crime's intro was created by Mike using Creative Commons Attribution licensed audio from purple-planet.com, soundbible.com, and freesoundeffects.com. Logo designed by Ben Greenberg. Thanks for listening to this episode of Brew Crime Podcast.
So who knows if this is all going to work? We'll find out.
We'll find out.
When Rude Boy, and I had a radio show back in college, we loved it. And it was, it was, like I said, college radio, internet-based. But, it was a hoot and a holler, and we ended up adding another one to our podcasts. What am I talking about? What was I writing here? We're going to have to delete that. I don't know what I'm talking about. Oh, I see where I was going with this. Let's take this back, Mike.
The way back.
Yep.
Yeah, there we go.
Film that promised... Ugh. One of his most popular was during his time fundraising and hosting shows and traveling the country. He also volunteered a lot. Sorry, I wanted to make sure it wasn't Carrie saying you're too loud. Okay, we're going to go back. February 2012, a reporter writes that, various words, the BBC... I don't know where I was going with this. Just cut that part out. He was stripped of honorary, said that they would redistribute.
As I pull up the outro. Do, 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 do.
As long as you don't pull out. Or maybe you should, I don't know. Whatever.
I'll pull that joke out.
You do you, boo-boo.
Yeah, exactly. Let's pull up our patrons again.